or chair rather. Thanks. And also board member for the Academy of Leadership and Innovation. It's been really fun to get to work with the executive committee and larger board of the SIG and get up to speed on things that have been happening that you just couldn't possibly know from watching from afar. So thanks to all the committee members that are here, and thanks to our panelists for joining us today. We're hoping to have an inspired conversation about the direction of this group and how we hope to proceed in the future. I've got a few questions prepared for our panelists, and I hope to save some time at the end for more open discussion. So if you've got questions that are burning, feel free to drop them in the chat or just hold on to them for time at the end. But I'll start this conversation with an invitation for our panelists to introduce themselves. So my question for each of you is, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to the Global Health Special Interest Group. I'm going to go in alphabetical order by first name. So Brooke, if you'd start us off and tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you here.
I unmuted.
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. All right. Hi, guys. My name is Brooke Pantano. I'm a new grad physical therapist. I graduated in April from the University of Pittsburgh. And now I work in the outpatient neurologic setting, mainly with patients with spinal cord injury. And while I was in undergrad, I worked a lot in the pro bono setting at a clinic that we had in Pittsburgh. And it's been an interest of mine throughout my schooling. I got a chance to present at the pro bono national conference that's held in Pennsylvania. And my lovely professor, well, now we're colleagues, Bonnie Vireg, had recommended that I come and chat and join on this conversation.
Thank you so much for being here, Brooke. Your perspective is a critical one. Jeff, how about you? A little bit about yourself and what brought you to the SIG.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Hartman, and I'm faculty here at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And yeah, I'm one of the few here. I think Jenny, Aaliyah, I'm not sure who else. I think we date ourselves way back to the cross-cultural and international period of the SIG. And I joined it because of the international aspect. At the time, I was doing a lot of global work, and I think I was about ready to do a master's in public health with the global health certificate. And so this seemed like a natural fit for me from that aspect. And so I've been a member ever since and held a variety of roles within the SIG and watched it evolve into what it is today. So I love it. It's a great place and great people.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. I can't wait to hear a little bit more of that history as we get into our conversation. But first, Maria, how about you? A little bit about yourself and what brings you to the SIG.
Okay, so I'm Maria Aguila. I'm graduated originally with a bachelor's in physical therapy from the Philippines. So I'm an internationally educated PT. Went back for my transitional doctorate in Rutgers in Newark. So I've been a resident of New Jersey for the past 20 years. Have been practicing in the outpatient ortho mainly, also for majority of those years. So I co-own a mom and pop, we call it physical therapy clinics, both in Jersey City and the Bronx with my husband, Ben, who's also a physical therapist. A lot of my, advocacies is also revolved around internationally educated PTs and also service learnings from my heritage country, the Philippines. So the natural, interest in global health SIG. And that's really what brought me into ALI and also the global health SIG.
Awesome. Critical perspectives abound. Thank you for being here and bringing up the caboose here. Winston, if you'd tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you to this space.
Definitely. Hey, what's up, everybody? I am a recent graduate of PT school, just 8 years ago, not that long ago. I'm an assistant professor here at Northeastern University in Boston. I just started that job 2 months ago, so that's a real new recent thing. I got my PhD in adaptive physical activity, where my research focuses on physical activity promotion. I also have an MPH, so I consider myself a public health physical therapist. So I really love the global health SIG and taking up that populational health perspective. What brought me to the global health SIG was first getting connected with ALI back when it was HPA. Well, so getting connected with ALI, and then I had a colleague, Cauilan Smith, who told me about the global health SIG and the Catalyst groups. So we kind of got together, created a Catalyst group, and just been kind of working within the group since then for like a couple of years. So.
Nice. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're going to have some, I think, important discussions about the role of Catalyst groups as well as we proceed. So I've got a question for each one of you, but I also want all of us to be thinking in the back of our mind what global health even means to us, and whether or not what we think the function of this group is well served by that language. I think that'll be something that we continue to explore as we re-identify ourselves and come to a shared identity. But I think maybe to get us started, Jeff, I'd like to start with you. If you could tell us a little bit about the history of the SIG and how it's evolved over your time engaging with it.
Yeah, I can share my perspective, and I'd welcome anyone else's perspective as well. Like I said, I joined the SIG back in the cross-cultural and international days. And I wasn't there from the beginning, but my understanding was it was developed to kind of meet the needs of people who were interested in doing international work, as well as the people who were doing domestic work in communities, in highly diverse communities. And it was a place to kind of bring the people together to talk about a lot of these issues associated with cross-cultural and international work. As once I joined it, I think I was part of kind of that wave of people who were starting to join that SIG because of the international aspect of it. And I think there's more and more of us joining, and it was recognized. And I think it was Celia Pichak. It went to a conference, an international conference, and came back one time and just said, "Hey, listen, there's a big movement in the global health world that I think really captivates what this SIG is all about." And she said, they don't define global health as just going abroad internationally. They define global health as addressing global issues that exist both domestically and internationally. And that's what we're about. We have people here that are working domestically, and we have people here that are interested in working internationally. Why are we splitting it up? Let's fall under this umbrella of global health. And it captivates everything that we're about. And so she proposed that, and there was a fair amount of resistance from the cross-cultural group, from the domestic group. And again, this is my perspective. And we had a lot of conversation, debate, and ultimately we viewed it as an opportunity to educate people about, again, this new kind of definition of global health. And it was our responsibility to do that and to talk about inequities, injustices that exist in communities all around the world. And it was our calling to address those in some way. And so we changed the name to the Global Health SIG. And I think when we did that, we did see a big boom of people coming to the HPA section as a result of that. And I think we started getting some recognition from the section. We started up the global health event at CSM, and the numbers started growing quite a bit. And so from that perspective, it was a great decision to move in that direction. And it's kind of taken us to where we are now today. And I think, again, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but my perspective is we are very heavily oriented towards the global work, these short-term experiences in global health. And I'm not sure if that's always where the founding members planned it to go, but that's kind of where I feel like it's at. And so that's my perspective of the history of the SIG. And again, I welcome others who have been around just as long as I have to contribute as well, if they feel so.
Yeah, and I'll just underscore that. You called out Aaliyah and immediate past president Jenny. If either of you have anything to contribute about the history of the SIG or the evolution, even since it's been the Global Health SIG, because it's been the Global Health SIG for a long time. And I think there's even some significant evolution since that time as well. feel free to join us.
And it's been 20 years, so my historical perspective may be skewed a little bit. So
Yeah, totally.
I would agree 100% with everything Jeff said. And I think that I have mixed feelings about the growth. I think that in growing, we kind of lost the international portion. And our focus on global health increased significantly. So I'm a little sad about that, but with Maria bringing on the international aspect, I'm happy that some revival has happened, although her focus is more on the internationally educated physical therapists. So it still leaves out people like me who are international, but educated in the United States, if that makes any sense. So I am considered an immigrant. I thought I was first generation, but with having kids, I learned that they are first generation and I am the immigrant. So it still leaves me out. I'm still out in somewhere in La La Land. So I'm hoping that Kai and the reorganization will create a home for me as well, once again in the Global Health SIG.
Thanks, Aaliyah. I've definitely felt what you feel too, but I think when we get a chance to hear from Maria, you'll find that there are spaces for folks like us that have been developed. And part of what we're discussing today is how to overlap and synthesize some of the work that these different groups are doing. So Maria, hold that thought. I've got a whole platform for you. Jenny, anything you want to add?
Yeah, just a couple quick comments. And that's that when Jill Latanzi Black got involved, we really had a big focus on there was a lot of attention on pro bono at the time. And that was part of the evolution too, in terms of bringing that to the forefront. And then Cheryl can probably comment on this. And Kathy and whoever else, we've focused a lot on in the last several years on the Global Health Catalyst talks and trying to make them represent different parts of what we care about. And I think that's been helpful, but I'm not sure if it's changed the everybody's understanding of what we do as a SIG. But I think that was intentional. It was intentional to choose topics that we wanted to make sure people knew that we cared about.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jenny. And I think, what I'm picking up from this conversation is we're a very diverse group in and of ourselves, and we have a lot of different ways that we approach this work. And what we're trying to do is find common ground so that we can be working together and still addressing our many varied interests. So thank you all for that. And I think it's a really perfect segue to you, Brooke, to talk a little bit about pro bono work. So as we just heard, much of the history of this group has had to focus on altruism and on serving underserved populations. Many of our members volunteer with faith-based organizations, charities, and pro bono groups. What do you think today's PT and PTA students need to learn to help address these disparities?
Yeah, so I think probably the most important thing, I think back to, so part of the reason I got interested in becoming more involved in pro bono work and, kind of addressing social determinants of health is because I come from a low income background. And, so kind of growing up had experienced some of that. And it's something that, is very personal to me. And I've always wanted to, make sure that everyone receives equal care across the board. So I think something then when I kind of went to school and was in PT school that I noticed that a lot of students are kind of like, let's say you just don't have experience, maybe you're aren't in a diverse area, or we just aren't really thinking about, social determinants of health. That's probably a big one. I can think about when I was still in school, something that we had started to introduce because we had like a DEI group. And we also had a lot of like talks with guest speakers and stuff is kind of bridging into that social determinants of health disparities, things that are going to impact these populations that we're serving. We're kind of going into it with the lens of, obviously as PTs, we're here to treat the whole person, that's a great part of our profession is that we get to really spend time with people. And the biggest difference is just if someone has a lack of resources, or let's say, they're undocumented and that's the reason they don't have healthcare and there's communication barrier there. And whatever the case may be, whether that's housing insecurity or food insecurity, or we just I don't have the environment to be able to do my HEP at home, to be able to recognize those factors, to screen for those factors, and to be able to address them appropriately. So we're making sure that, you know, everyone that we treat has that same quality of care. So I think in my experience then doing pro bono work with several other classmates, that was something that, you know, we talked about a lot. When I went to do the pro bono network conference, that was a big talk by other students and other clinics, and all their clinics kind of ran differently. There was student run clinics. Then our clinic was kind of a hybrid. So there was actual employees of the health system that worked and did this work within the clinic. Because I think that's a whole other conversation as well about the idea of, you know, having untrained or like not fully licensed students go in and being the people to treat these populations. And I'm like, okay, is that the same quality of care? I don't think so. So that was a big conversation for us. You know, I think also just talking to members of the community, that was a big thing that was discussed. Like, how can we actually meet the community where they're at? Talk to public health leaders, talk to, you know, people within that community that are part of that community, and, you know, meeting people where they are and realizing like how we can actually help. You know, we're not here to save anyone, but we are here to provide care to everyone and make sure that they're getting what they need. So I think that is a big thing. And, you know, part of that is just, you know, meeting people and understanding that the work you're doing is something that, you know, isn't necessarily extraordinary, but it's important. And that's something that should be the baseline. Like, all of us should be able to provide equal care to every patient that we serve. So I think that's kind of, I think what students need to be able to recognize, and then have those resources available to understand like how we can meet people where they're at, provide them with those extra resources, how we as a clinic can be equipped to make sure that everyone gets that same standard of care.
Yeah, thank you so much. And, you know, I'm hearing in your answer the complexities that this group is grappling with all the time, right? So things about communication, issues around ethics, issues around models of disease and health, right? Social determinants of health, that sort of thing. Advocacy work, how to sustain the work that we're doing over large periods of time. And these are things that haven't necessarily been given priority in our curricula as trainees of physical therapy. And so I think that's part of what makes this group at the cutting edge of work in this space. So thank you so much for bringing that perspective. And I'm going to use that to segue to you, Maria. We're talking a lot about students and faculty who are based in the U.S. who are either thinking about local groups or going abroad. But I know that your work with internationally educated PTs, and more recently with the Multicultural PT group, addresses a different set of issues. And so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about each of those groups and what you see as potential facilitators or barriers, if they exist, to collaboration between those groups and the SIG.
Thank you. Okay. So I was really thinking about that question, right? And what I realized is that between the IEPT, the terms internationally educated PT and multicultural PT, what is actually not being explicitly said is the word that Aaliyah used earlier, which is immigrant. Because at the heart, and what is common to both groups, is really the immigrant aspect. And like I said, I am an internationally educated PT, so which means I am actually I am the immigrant. My children are the first generation, right? So this group really evolved from having been, and actually one of the very first members of the group as well is actually here, and I'm very happy that we're serving together in this, Kripa. Okay, so our group actually started out as a staff work group under Heidi Kovasovsky, who is now with World PT, right? So she was a APTA work staffer at that point, actually about 3 years ago, I would say. And she actually was the one who brought together the staff work group for international educated PT. So in the about 2 years that we were together, we were able to really tackle a lot of IEPT centric issues, and to this day we continue to do that. But in doing so, okay, we also met with I would say others like Aaliyah, okay, and also students, as we were actually presenting at CSM, doing a lot of the live talks on Facebook Live, and grappling with questions where some people who are not necessarily immigrant themselves, but are multicultural, in that they are first generation, meaning having been born here or actually migrating to the States as young children are also grappling with. So these are people within, internal to the physical therapy profession, in that they're either students or professionals, or may have been serving multicultural communities, like say myself. So I'm actually in both worlds, so to speak, right? So that actually evolved. So finally, as a staff work group, we really had a natural expiration date. Think about it as a task force. So when that group kind of expired, we thought, what, we need to expand it to be a lot more of a formal group. Hence, it became a catalyst group. No, not a catalyst group. Yes, a catalyst group within ALI. But we actually evolved into being the multicultural PT group, basically actually to address what is Aaliyah's concern right now, right? So yes, Aaliyah, you do have a home within the multicultural PT group because it's open to IEPTs, first generation immigrants who are PTs, PTAs, students themselves, and anybody who may not be an immigrant or a first generation immigrant, but is actually serving the multicultural community. So I do not have the historical perspective that some of our, members have, because I've only really been serving in the global health SIG, say in the last, I would say 4 or 5 years. But what we really saw, I guess, which was not apparent in the last 5 years, was the internal focus of really serving the multicultural community within the United States. And hence we saw that opportunity that, as much as we're going out there, we're doing great work. I myself am doing that. But at the same time, we got to see what the landscape is within the United States, right? The immigration pattern is changing. By 2035, there's actually, they say it's about 40% of the pediatric population are actually born by immigrants themselves. So we got to be more proactive as well in looking at what is this population going to take a look like, right? And just because immigrants themselves are transposed physically in the country, it doesn't mean that they're still going to have access in a way of, not because the services are not there, but because they don't really have a better understanding of what the American healthcare system is. Sometimes we're so busy going out there, but don't understand as much what are we grappling with here. So when we say access, I really think, I strongly believe, and even as the studies that I've seen, that we also have to understand where they're coming from, because that person may have lived here, like myself, in the last 20 years, but you got to understand that values, traditions, belief, you just don't leave just like that, and so even within the physical therapy profession, this is hopefully what we're going to bring as a multicultural PT Catalyst group, is that understanding of how do we actually better serve these communities. So from a patient perspective, right? And another thing that we have actually, I myself have realized in talking to a lot of the students, right, is their own acculturation experience. When you say acculturation is, what are these changes that I myself am going through, or my parents are going through, navigating 2 different cultures, and where do I put myself? A lot of them actually are lost. I see it in my patients and their families. I see it in some of the students, and there needs also to be a greater understanding on that. And hopefully this is something, where the multicultural PT Catalyst group can really help. So, okay, I don't see any of it as a potential barrier. What I can really see is a very much like a symbiotic relationship between the global health SIG and what the multicultural PT Catalyst group can actually offer.
Great, that's encouraging to hear, and hopefully as we continue to further identify our direction forward as a SIG, we can do that in partnership with groups that are looking to be in collaboration with us over time. So thanks so much for that overview, super helpful. And that brings me to you, Winston, and thinking about Maria's points about immigration and migration patterns and things like that. It's not lost on me that the SIG sort of started as this cross-cultural focused group, right? And recently has been thinking a lot more about the impacts of globalization and perhaps even colonization on international partnerships and the relationships that individual members hold in their work. So I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about how you think the impacts of globalization and colonization could and should be addressed in the SIG and in the work of its members.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to say you could appoint Maria, and I think she'd do a great job. Everything you said, I want to join the Multicultural Catalyst. I'm a first generation.
I was already eyeing you, Winston.
Yeah, I'm a first generation American. My mom's from Trinidad and Tobago, so like everything you're saying, I was like, oh, yeah. But yeah, as far as the globalization and the colonization, I think one of the most important things is leading with humility. I think having that global health perspective coming from like a Western industrialized country, you have to be real careful with like your perspectives and how you kind of project that onto like different communities and populations, right? So, sometimes I can remember maybe even like 5-10 years ago, a lot of, I just feel like a lot of healthcare professionals, we carried ourselves like the gold standard of healthcare was whatever is going on in the US, right? And it's like, so then we try to engage in these kind of global health talks, and what ends up happening is that colonization piece. Oh, why are you doing this? This is how it's supposed to be done. When we really mean, well, we do it like this in the US, right? And, taking that approach, it closes us off to learning, right? There's a lot of different approaches and perspectives globally that we have been in the West have been cut off from, simply because we're like, oh, that's done in that country. We don't do that here. Probably not good enough because we're America. That's an over exaggeration, but those sentiments have persisted for a long time. And I love what Jeff said about how the goal was for the Global Health SIG was to bring diverse perspectives globally to talk to each other and understand how what we're doing can help each other. And I think that's kind of the approach we need moving forward, right? And the question is, how do we make sure we're taking that step, right? That we have these health professionals who are taking this global humility approach and using that to share these perspectives to help push each other forward globally. And a lot of that does start with PT education, right? So I do a lot of my work starts with disability, how to support people with disabilities and physical therapists with disabilities. And that same context applies of like, thinking and understand another person's perspective without just listening, right? And, and as PTs, there was a paper that just got published in PTJ, I think practicing intellectual humility, right? Just being aware that you don't know everything and your perspective is not the only perspective, and there's room for diverse thought, right? And it was specific to disability, but again, that can be applied into a lot of areas, and I think it's pertinent to keep it in global health spaces.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, I would venture to say not just room for diverse thought, but need for it, particularly if we're going to be engaging across contexts. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And if it's all right, Jeff, I'm going to go off script a little bit here and ask you to talk a little bit about a tool that we've been thinking about, the Brocher Declaration, as a guiding document for this group, and just tell the folks here a little bit about that writing.
Yeah. It's if you're not familiar with it, I'd strongly encourage you to check it out. You can just Google Brocher Declaration, but there's a group of like 4 or 5 people from a variety of different sectors of the world, as well as professionally too. I think a physician, another one's a sociologist, another person I think is like the director of international services for a Catholic health organization. And they all came together to really try to think about, how to do these short-term engagements in global health ethically well. And they met a number of times and came up with this document that looks like Kripa just posted in the chat for us. And it just outlines a variety of different key concepts for doing these type of activities. We meet now on like a quarterly basis, and there's probably, I don't know, 30 people that meet and kind of talk about how this declaration is being used and implemented and how the organization is kind of evolving. What's interesting is the leadership, they recognized after publishing this declaration and getting a bunch of institutions to sign on to it and promote it and support it, they recognized that the voice of the community was not being heard. And they I give them a lot of credit for humbling themselves and admitting error. And so what they are now really doing, and I guess they held this meeting with a bunch of representatives from a variety of countries around the world, from some low middle income countries, and they held a meeting and basically didn't say a word and just asked them, what is this whole short-term engagement in global health? What are you experiencing? What's working? What's not? What are the problems with it? And what do we need to do better? And I guess they went for 3 days, and they didn't say hardly a word and just listened. And at the end of those 3 days, I guess it was pretty remarkable what came of it. And the 4 leaders in particular said, we've been doing this work for a long time. This is the most amazing experience we've ever had in our life. And they said, this is what we need to do. We need to reverse the power dynamics, and we need to really talk more about how to engage with community partners collaboratively. And so I think there's gonna be another phase to this declaration coming out here, really focusing on those partnerships, those intimate collaborative partnerships, and how to facilitate those, how to do those right. But in the meantime, this Brocher Declaration is something that's pretty powerful. I think there's a lot of good points to it, and I think can be a guiding document, even as it is now. And I think it's going to continue to evolve. And I think we as a SIG could potentially evolve with them as well in some ways. So, Kripa posted it. Take a look at it, and let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I mean, what a powerful example in real time of the intellectual or cultural humility that we were just talking about, right? So thank you so much for that. I'm watching the time. I'm sure some people have to drop off at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and ask my final question for each of the panelists. And if there's time for folks to stay on and ask their own questions, we would invite you to do just that. So I'm going to start with you, Brooke, and ask, what would you like to see the Global Health SIG offer for its members or the larger community in the next 5 years?
Yeah, so I think in terms of student engagement, so I'm also I'm finishing out my term, but I'm on the APTA Student Board of Directors. And something that we've been kind of looking at across the board in terms of all of the academies and then their SIGs is student engagement and how we feel like they're engaging. It's tough as a student because you're already like overwhelmed with school, and kind of recognizing what's available and what we can do. I think there's definitely room to engage students a little bit more within, I would say, like the academy and the SIG itself. I think because there's so many, because it covers such a broad scope, a lot of students just kind of might not know kind of what they are engaging with. So I think something that could be 100% beneficial, I think, would be like kind of use of marketing on the part of like social media, but also just how, we are marketing ourselves as a SIG. And what we can offer students and new professionals as they kind of start on their journeys as clinicians. I think that's kind of the first way that you engage with students, especially with how powerful we know that social media is, just for, connection in that aspect. And I think kind of now, I think since we've all talked, I myself gather like a better perspective of kind of what we're offering. But I think just translating that to communicate that in a way to students. So like get that out either in graphics or just in a way on the website, so that way people can understand, like, this is why I'm coming here, this is what's being offered, and this is what I can learn from being here. Because there's already so much, that you're doing as a student, and you want to, know where you can go to get this type of information, to gain this knowledge, to gain these perspectives. So yeah, that's what I'd like to see, is better engagement with students and kind of, troubleshooting how we think we can better engage that population. So that way they stay on, and then we can grow more as a SIG.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think, Winston, I'm going to come to you next. We just heard about the student perspective. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you'd like to see the SIG offer? And I'm thinking particularly from the lens of faculty and folks who are helping to lead service learning types of lessons.
Yeah, definitely. I would like to see, well, two things. One thing I've been aware of in talking with different colleagues who are internationally educated and come to work in the US is difficulty with transferring your license and, like getting that stuff, and just even having like a group or support just for that, for professionals, I think would be nice to support, international colleagues. And I think something similar for students as well, as they're trying to, if they come from abroad to get a PT education, just being able to have a hub of support, just because of the different systems and culture. I think that would be pretty cool. Also, I think having opportunities to expand the global health SIG network abroad as well, like connecting with different international organizations, might be a great opportunity to kind of, get to really do that work under that global health umbrella. There's a lot of, international organizations, a lot of different opportunities to for international physical therapists to come here, do work for, physical therapists here to go abroad and do work and kind of learn. And I think the global health SIG could be like a strong center for that, to really facilitate, different collaborations for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maria. I feel like I have to come to you next after that. Thoughts on what's already being offered or what you'd like to see the SIG offer in the next 5 years?
Okay, where do we start? So Winston, first of all, I just wanted to say that the multicultural PT group, part of that is really supporting internationally educated PT. So I'm actually happy to say that CREPA is actually leading along with another member on that part of it. So we've already been working on, and actually have already made some headway, in what do you call it, licensure by endorsement, and some of the difficulties that internationally educated PTs in particular face, when transferring licenses from one state to the other and all that. So in particular, what I'm actually going to offer, like a very, like a more pragmatic, I think, offering to, I think, people who would really be interested in joining the Global Health SIG. And for one, I've developed like some implicit bias courses, right? And one of the things that I did not realize going into it is how cultural bias is actually very different from just racial bias and ethnic bias and all that. And in having understood a lot of that better, I think this is something, and this is actually Winston, what you've been talking about earlier on cultural humility on that, and making the, in a way, like the American standard, the gold standard, which is actually not, right, for global health SIG, and even for the standards of care, even in the United States. So, and as a clinician, I'm an educator and I'm also a clinician, I really see that having that cultural bias and not even being aware of it really is not an ideal way, and is not an ideal way of saying that we are doing evidence-based practice. Because as much as you have these standards of care, at the end of the day, you also have to have patients' collaboration, right? And you also have to as we say, like respect patients' values. And I think that is one offering that, as a global health SIG, we can actually offer members, even the rest of our fellow professionals, especially if they're either serving, like I said, a multicultural community within the United States, or even going out there and actually wanting to serve. So I've done, like I said, I've done both. I've even gone back to my own country thinking, hey, you know what, I have an understanding of both, but not really having lived there for a long time. I thought I did, until I realized actually, no, I didn't realize that I myself have already changed, and I'm more American now, even though the way I look haven't changed. So I think that that's one, like making sure that we are a resource for cultural bias courses. Another thing is that making people more aware, especially for, say, first generation and immigrants themselves, if you're talking about IEPTs, of the acculturation process that actually happens, and how acculturation to this day, because of the nature of the United States, is very multicultural, right? That it's actually still evolving, that the country is still evolving. And that is something that we always have to keep at the back of our minds. And also, I think that having heard the historical perspective and knowing where I myself actually is headed or want to add into Global Health SIG to make it, I guess, an organization that is very well equipped to serve our fellow professionals. I think I also want to see as much of the emphasis being put on serving the multicultural community, not just outside of the country, but also within the country. And maybe that is actually a big, for those who actually want to do service learning outside of the country, maybe serving, and finding like, I would say, like niches, what is that? Like cultural hubs within the country, and there's a lot, right? Could actually be a very good start to them if they actually want to go out there and immerse themselves in these cultures, because there's a lot of cultural pockets is actually what I was looking at. Like maybe we can identify cultural pockets within the country. And if they really truly want to serve outside, hey, you know what, why don't you just go and dip your toes, so to speak, in these cultural pockets before you even go into bigger community out there. It also, I think, makes the work for everyone as worthwhile, because in today's world, right, it seems like going out there and making it big right away is the way to go, when in reality it's not. Just like what Brooke was saying earlier, hearing her, is that I feel like every effort counts. You don't always have to go into the global stage for your effort to count, because every help is needed everywhere.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Maria. And I just want to, it reminds me of a conversation that you and I have had around acculturation too. Coming from a minoritized group within this country, my acculturation happened as I entered the profession, right? So it wasn't a country type of acculturation, but it was a very different space where I came from and where I was trying to get to. And so I think this conversation around acculturation has broader impact and opportunities for us to explore. So Jeff, I'm going to end with you, and I'd love to just hear, particularly from the lens of faculty and perhaps senior leaders in our field, what you'd like to see the SIG offer to its membership and to our leaders in the next few years.
Yeah, the good news, we have brilliant early mid-career people, even on this call, that have great ideas. And I don't have a lot to add from what Winston and Maria and others have said, fortunately. I think the big thing that I've heard is being a resource center, right, for all these ideas. Realistically, if we became an academy, that's a different story, right? We have different resources, and I think we could be more, we could do more, we could be more action oriented, but the reality, we won't be doing that anytime soon, and we'll be staying at the SIG level. And so I think really thinking about the resources that we have to be able to use, I think focusing on being a resource center and identifying domestic and international people, organizations, academic institutions, just doing really good work, as evidenced by the brochure standards and that type of stuff. I think highlighting those and making those type of resources available to people to kind of model themselves after, I think is a realistic vision and direction we could head. And connecting people, other organizations around the world, other SIGs, other entities, World Physiotherapy, that type of stuff, and making those connections and having a more of a presence and facilitating participation and collaboration, I think could be a powerful use of this SIG. And again, domestic and international, there's a lot of great organizations here in the States that are doing great work too. So just echoing what I've heard, and yeah, I think there's a lot of potential. We're already doing great stuff, and I think there's room for improvement for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to underscore that and just thank everybody for your thoughts and the work that you're doing so far. I'm really excited about the opportunities that we have in front of us. Brooke had to drop off to go treat a patient, but I want to thank her and the rest of the panelists for the time that you've shared with us already. I want to underscore this idea about us becoming a potential academy. We recently did a survey of our members and potential members, and that was actually a theme that came up from quite a few people. This idea of potentially moving out of the SIG space and becoming a separate independent academy with some of the catalyst groups that we have now becoming SIGs in that space. And so I just want to offer that up as a potential point for discussion, and invite any of you, if you've got any comments to make or any questions for the panelists, to raise your hand, and we'll queue up the discussion.
I have something. I don't know if this is a question, Kai. There's other global health SIGs, as you know, within other components, right? Sections and academies and all that. And I'm actually really just wondering, how do we differentiate ourselves? I mean, first of all, do we even need differentiation, right? In what ways are we actually duplicating the resources and the offerings that all these other global health SIGs actually offer? And if we ever become, an academy, like what becomes then of all these global health SIGs? Like when you say global health SIG, from what I've heard before, they say, oh, the ALI is the mother global health SIG. Well, we may know that internally, but how about the others?
Right.
Right. So I feel like it's also important to survey what is out there, even within the profession, because we're not the only one. And if there's, like even an avenue for collaboration, differentiation, whatever it is. But I think we're not a very big profession. We're also not very small. But I think that there also poses a challenge in that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I've been in touch with incoming chairs of other global health SIGs, and part of me wonders if it's a marketing issue, or, I know people in our profession can be quick to start a new thing when they're not familiar that another thing already exists. And so I wonder if that's part of it, but I do think the conversation about us becoming a standalone academy is a new opportunity for us to engage those other groups, and perhaps go down that road together. So yeah, thank you for that. Tara?
Question, can you guys give an example of other SIGs that are out there?
I know geriatrics has a global health SIG.
Okay.
That's the chair that reached out to me. I'm not sure the others. Yeah,
okay. I was familiar with that one. I didn't know if there's others that I wasn't aware of. Thanks.
Tara, all you?
Yeah, I'm coming from a little bit of a different perspective because I'm a director of clinical education. And so as I'm listening and hearing, my thoughts are also, I would love to, the two places where I've seen my students have questions, my international students, when they've been applying for residencies. There are some residencies that allow international students and others that don't allow international students. We have a nice global education office that does a lot of support of the students, but I think that that's an opportunity that you were talking about with the multicultural group to also speak to those residencies. But we also have students in our program who are interested in doing international work. And when you're talking about pockets and places and spaces that we might be able to do clinical education within this country, it would be really nice to have a sense so that I can speak to some of those students I know that are interested in either the pro bono world or are interested in doing international work, but perhaps we're not ready. We do send some students abroad, but that doesn't necessarily meet the need of each of the students. And so if I had an awareness of areas beyond, immediately I'm in Maine, and we have an immigrant population that exists in Maine that students can often work with, but there's so much more in the United States, and our students are from all over. So to have a knowledge base of where I might consider seeking placement for those students also would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea and potential document or database that we could potentially organize, and it would take some upkeep, right? So it would need some person power for that. But when you were talking, the first person that came to my mind is a nurse colleague of mine in the Chicagoland area. And the stat that's still mind-blowing to me is that their clinic treats people that have 53 different primary languages, 53 different languages that they have to treat in that one clinic. And so I imagine that in major hubs, New York's close to you, Boston has a huge Haitian immigrant population, DC, of course, Houston, Miami. I'm in San Francisco. There's a huge immigrant base there. So I think big international hubs around the country are low-hanging fruit. And then I think there are certain specific cultures that are placed in perhaps even mid-sized cities around the country. So I love that idea, and I think we could take that forward as a resource that could be accessed perhaps online. Thanks for that, Tara. Jenny.
First, I want to start by saying thanks so much for having this meeting. It's a great idea. It's so much fun to hear what people are thinking about. Gets your mind turning, which is always fun. Two thoughts. We mentioned World Physio, who are pretty aware that we exist, and between Heidi plus all the other people that are there, they really know about the SIG and many of the people involved in the SIG. So that's a really good connection. But I was also going to mention North America Caribbean region board, and I think we have opportunities to partner with them or explore what we could do with them. I'm on the executive committee, and we're open to ideas, and that could be really interesting to think about how we could kind of make a partnership somehow, or explore topics and things like that. So that'll be interesting. And that's one thought. My second thought has to do with some things that Maria and Winston said related to students. And we have a lot of faculty on members of the SIG. And I've always felt like we should be doing more for faculty, teaching them how to talk about social determinants of health, global health, all these topics. And I think that would be useful to do either in a presentation or a webinar or something like that. But picking topics like that faculty don't all yet feel really comfortable talking about, and providing resources for those people. My other faculty, my other academic thought related to Maria and Winston's comments has to do with immigrant and first generation students in our programs. They are the ones who struggle, and they have a hard time making community, finding community. I'm down the hall from Tara in Maine. It's pretty hard for some of those students to find a community in our program, and they end up leaving. So that would be a really interesting conversation to have with faculty, but also maybe a niche that we could take up in terms of education for students in that situation. How, so not just the acculturation part, but also, I don't exactly know. I can't talk really well about what the issues exactly are, but I think that would be a niche area where we could do some, I don't know, teaching presentations, something like that, either for the faculty audience or for the student audience.
Thanks so much for that, Jenny.
May I just share, in a way, I don't know, this is just a shameless plug, but just to answer one of that question, actually, Jenny, we are actually going to present at the CSM specifically on that. It's the hyphenated American experience, and this is really geared towards students who may be first generation or immigrants themselves, and also faculty, and talking through a lot of this really falls under acculturation. And how to this day, because you could be, like well into your adult life and you're still experiencing acculturation, because it's really a never-ending experience. But in particular, something that is actually very specific to them as students in the physical therapy profession and would-be professionals. So there will be panelists all coming from, you know, like different cultural backgrounds, but what is common is that they themselves are like, you know, immigrants themselves or first generation immigrants, and are actually going through the same experiences to this day. And I think that, again, this has actually been something that came out of one of our previous CSM experience, where, I mean, presentations where this was not our primary goal, but we identified it as a need out of that.
I should have known you were already on it, Maria.
Oh yeah. Winston, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I just remembered, I actually did one of my physical therapy clinical rotations abroad in Trinidad and Tobago. And it really, when I did that, it kind of, so my parents are from there, but the area that my parents are from is not the best area. So I had a skewed perspective of what went down there. And then I did my internship, and it was me essentially learning the Trinidadian healthcare system. And then I got an opportunity to talk to different patients we saw about the system and how it worked. And it kind of gave me a better understanding of the differences between the two, and, like, you know, pros and cons. Like, thinking back, I could have probably did more with it, but just having that experience and being in a different system and and having to learn that system instead of trying to say, hey, I'm in the American system, just do it this way. It kind of gave me a better appreciation for, you know, the system they have down there, whether they need to change things or not. And I think, like, even providing opportunities like that, which is not easy, of course, traveling abroad and you haven't stayed here for a couple months. But I think even things like that can kind of give students an exposure that's part of that, like, decolonization process. But then you get a little taste of, like, that global health perspective by actually working in their system.
Yeah.
You know? So,
yeah, I totally agree with that. I just got back from Ghana a few days ago. I was running a leadership retreat there for a fellowship for mid-career professionals, not students, from a variety of different disciplines. And we had one Ghanaian fellow. She's the first fellow in this program that's been running for 10 years from that country. And even though I planned most of it, she planned one half day, a panel at the University Medical Center where she worked at. And she's been profuse about the transformative impact working in her own country, in her own context, with the people with a variety of aspects or perspectives had on her, right? So at first, she says, at first, I'm like, why are we going to my country? Everybody else gets to go somewhere else. I want to go somewhere else. But at the end, she's like, wow, I didn't realize how much impact working in my own system would have on me. So totally underscore that and feel the same, right? I also have an email here from the sole Black student in my class, coming to the sole Black faculty at our program, saying, I'm doing fine academically, but I need to talk to you about some other stuff, right? And so I think that this has, again, broad implications for how we approach our communities, both students and colleagues alike. I'm cognizant of the time, 1:13, I see two hands. So Tara and Bonnie, I think I'm going to give you all the last words. And yeah, Tara, it's all you.
So I'll be very quick. I just wanted to come on the heels of what Winston had to say and in talking about my interest in international clinical placements for students. And I'm also on the clinical education, the new Clinical Education Commission, which is part of ACAPT. And so the conversations are happening that are separate. But when I think about all the global places and the places that we send students, there's a question of whether or not the student is getting a clinically excellent experience. I think this is probably a broader conversation that we need to have when there's more time as to what makes something a clinically excellent experience, and are we preparing them for the United States boards? And so I consider right now the international experiences to be almost like a specialty experience for the students. So they're having an inpatient rotation and outpatient rotation for us. And then right now we happen to be utilizing both Italy and Belize. And I think that there are, I myself have a daughter who joined our family from Ethiopia. I enjoy speaking with practitioners there. I've also gone and worked in Ghana as well with our group that goes to Ghana. So with all of that said, I think there's room to talk about clinical experiences for students that are abroad, what that means, and how we are going to coin those as clinically excellent and relevant. And I'll sort of end there because I think it's a larger discussion.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Bonnie, what are you thinking about?
I was just following up on some of the conversation about faculty. I was starting to type my answer really quickly in the chat to save us time, but I just wanted to say, from a faculty standpoint, I think we as a SIG, we know that these topics that we've been talking about today and that are listed on the website are so important to us, but often, unfortunately, can seem almost like ancillary or extra in professional PT curriculum. And I know there's lots of efforts depending on the program that you're in to, thread it, infuse it, make it, make the value really understandable to students. But I do think a lot of programs still struggle with that. My program, we're still working on it, right? Trying to make it part of our culture. So just putting that out there, I would be happy to help lead efforts in that area that we've kind of discussed today, whether it's education of faculty or students. So we'll see.
I love that. Thank you so much. I think we've got such good momentum and so many good ideas. And like Jeff said, strong leadership at all levels here. And so I just want to thank you all again for your time today and for such a stimulating discussion. I think it's really going to propel us forward. I hope to see more of these town halls on some sort of regular cadence ongoing. So stay tuned for that. But in the interest of time, have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you again. Look forward to talking to you all soon. Mm-hmm.